Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Roshni Kurian, and I'm the Education Coordinator here at the Canadian Association of Social Workers. Thank you all for joining us today for a very special webinar in partnership with CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. Today's topic will be on incorporating accessibility for persons who are blind/low vision. We are so lucky to welcome the CNIB team back for our second partnership offering to CASW members. The first one was delivered 3 years ago, and you can find the link to that recording under the resource section. Before we begin with our presentation, I first want to acknowledge that the CASW is situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Our work is carried out across the traditional lands of many nations and peoples across Turtle Island. CASW recognizes our complicity in settler colonial violence, and we honor our commitments to truth and repairing relationships. We welcome you to take a moment to reflect on the territories that you are tuning in from and the many nations and peoples who have cared for our lands. Let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. Before introducing our presenters, I just want to go over some housekeeping formalities about the webinar.net platform. Today's event will be 90 minutes, and towards the end, we will address questions from the audience. Each of the widgets on your screen are adjustable in size and movable so that you can arrange your screen to suit your preferences. Live closed captioning in English and French is available on the platform under the media player widget. I encourage you to type your questions in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of the session. And a recording of this event will be available in 24 hours using the link that you signed up with. As usual, you will receive your certificate of attendance at the end of the session, or you can download it directly from this platform. And lastly, please be sure to fill out the survey that will appear at the end of the session to let us know what you thought. Today's webinar will examine the field of social work through a lens of disability, specifically blindness and low vision. This session will explore ways to create a more inclusive profession, from delivering and accessing supports and services to fostering accessibility and inclusion within social work practice. I now have the pleasure to introduce our presenters. The first to join us here today is Ben Akuoko. Ben is a registered social worker with over a decade of experience in the field. He is a passionate advocate for the intersection of race, culture, and disability, using public speaking, consulting, and media engagement to drive meaningful conversations and systemic change. Ben holds a social service worker diploma from Sheridan College and a Bachelor of Social Work from Laurentian University and a Master of Social Work from the University of Waterloo. As a proud Black man of Ghanaian descent living with retinitis pigmentosa, he draws on his personal, professional, and academic experiences to amplify underrepresented voices and empower marginalized communities. Currently, Ben serves on the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, is a member of the National Disability Initiative Working Group for the Slate Foundation, and is an original member of CNIB's Black Voices United. He actively participates in coalitions dedicated to raising awareness around race and disability. His expertise has led him to deliver guest lectures on race, disability, and accessibility at Fanshawe College, York University, and Toronto Metropolitan University. He's also been a featured panelist for organizations such as the Centre for Independent Living Toronto and the ASE Community Foundation for Black Canadians with Disabilities. Secondly, we have David Greenidge, who is a skilled specialist in accessible technology, renowned for his ability to deliver innovative solutions that empower Canadians living with sight loss. As one of the driving forces behind CNIB Access Labs, he spearheads the design and management of tailored accessibility projects, ensuring their success and lasting impact. An unwavering advocate for accessibility and inclusion, David is deeply committed to the mission of CNIB Access Labs and the broader vision of CNIB to create meaningful community change. He consistently seeks out initiatives that enhance accessibility and foster greater inclusivity for Canadians with disabilities. Last but not certainly not least, we have with us Andrew Gourlay, who is CNIB Strategic Partnership Developer. Andrew is a living with sight loss, dedicated to the empowering the community through meaningful collaborations with national companies from coast to coast. With a focus on impact and innovation, Andrew builds and nurtures partnerships that drive accessibility, inclusion, and opportunity. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining us here today. We're very much looking forward to your presentation, and I will hand the podium over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction, Rashmi. I always joke around when I get an introduction like that, I have to bring you around for my PR. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And we are here, as Rashmi was making mention, to talk about incorporating accessibility for persons who are blind or low vision in the social work field. Okay, so today my section, I'll be sharing my experiences, practical strategies, and systemic insights to create a more inclusive atmosphere for those who are blind and low vision in the social work field. Followed by this, I will be handing it off to my colleague from Access Labs, David, and he will look at digital accessibility in the workplace and education. Okay, so I'm gonna share. I know Rashmi did an amazing job in giving my bio, but I am gonna share some of the experiences that I have had with social work and my journey in this field. Okay, so as you folks all know, my name is Ben Akuoko. Everybody refers to me as Ben, so if you see that, it's the same person. And as Rashmi was making mention, I'm an individual who lives with the eye condition of retinitis pigmentosa. So I was diagnosed it at 2 years old. It affects the peripheral vision, as well as nighttime vision, as well as eventually central vision. So for myself is right now I'm using a screen reader, which has your devices speaking to you. So as you folks notice, I'm wearing headphones. So my notes are coming through the headphones. And I like to joke around that I'm not trying to fulfill my dream of being a DJ. It's all my notes coming through my headphones. I'm also a white cane user as well. And right now, I currently work at the CNIB as a specialist of education and advocacy. And that's where I'm working with young people who live with low vision and blindness, and to help parents and families advocate for the young person in the education system, as well as bring outreach presentations to mainstream schools about how to make their environments inclusive to those who are blind or low vision. Also, I do a lot of public speaking for side projects. I do consulting, guest lecturing for post secondary school and organizations. And that is to challenge the intersecting identities of race and disability. So I don't tell you this all because I want you all to know, oh, good does how good Ben's doing. But I tell you this because when I first started in the social work field, I didn't want to originally start in the social work field. And this was because I didn't see myself reflected in the social work field. So at the time, I didn't know any Black men who worked as social workers. And then on top of that, who lived with low vision or blindness. So right now, as Rashmi was making mention, I've been in the field for 10 years. And to be honest, I would not want to be in any other field than social work. Pretty much, I'm absolutely in love with what I do. So over the years, I have worked with children with disabilities. I work with individuals living with mental health, adults with disabilities, and then working with adults with disabilities to acquire employment as well. So during my placements, I had the ability to work in youth probation, CNIB, of course, and working in counseling services with U Waterloo as well. So I say this because it brings all my identities to this work of social work, and that's why I feel like it's so important today to look at incorporating individuals who are blind and low vision, because it's so important to bring those identities in the way we practice and in our workplaces, as well as when we're delivering the social work program. Okay, so the one thing that I feel that's very important is belonging. So whether you're a student, practitioner, or a client, everybody needs that feeling of belonging. And in the field of social work, that's what we promote. We want everybody in society to belong. So when you live with blindness or low vision, that sense of belonging starts to get challenged. So barriers such as inaccessibility, a lack of education, and unconscious bias can really be these barriers to challenge individuals who are blind and low vision to really feel that they fit into society. So, although, as I made mention, it's such a great field and we have such great people in the field, even fellow social workers or educators can contribute to these barriers without even noticing. So, today we're going to talk about how we have to foster we're going to talk about how we have to foster inclusivity, equity, and when it does come to the people we work with, as well as when we're in the classrooms and when we're in employment settings. Okay, so we're going to go to the stats and why does this matter? So here's the reality. 1.5 million Canadians live with low vision, and 5.5 Canadians have an eye disease that may lead to vision loss. So this means whether you're in a classroom, whether you're in a community, whether you're at a workplace, you're going to come across someone who's blind or low vision. And it's so important to be prepared. When I do presentations for young people, I always ask them, I'm like, hey, young people, have you ever come across a person who's blind or low vision? And some of them are saying, oh, no, this is my first time, or no, I don't know someone who has low vision. And I always give them that joke that you're speaking to someone who has low vision, right? So you have come across someone with low vision or blindness. So it's so important that we know during our practices, whatever field we're in, whether we're working in the hospital, while we're working with child services, while we're working in nonprofits, that we're always going to come across someone with a disability, and specifically blindness or low vision. So it's so important that social workers need to be prepared to be engaged with individuals who are blind or low vision with competence and confidence as well. So just like I said, with us as social workers, the main goal is that we want to feel or have people feel included in these spaces. And individuals who are blind or low vision should feel seen and should feel heard. Okay, so understanding blindness and low vision. So a key takeaway is that we have to remember that blindness is a spectrum. So not everybody who is blind or low vision function in the same way. So for example, as I made mention, I live with retinitis pigmentosa. A person who is diagnosed with the same eye condition will not see the same way that I see. So it's so important to remember this, because this really impacts our practice on how we interact with individuals, whether if we're doing counseling, whether in a classroom environment. We have to remember that not everybody's the same, and a one glove fits all mentality is not effective for these individuals. So we also have to remember that Some people use canes, some people use guide dogs, people use certain type of technology, some people use screen readers, some people use magnifiers. So, with that said, when we're working with individuals who are blind or low vision, we have to know that we're not the professionals exactly. We shouldn't be telling individuals how to access accommodations. We shouldn't be letting individuals know on how to interact in their lives. They're the professional because everybody's so different, right? Even if we're professionals, even us at CNIB, we have to understand the different circumstances of our participants and our clients, where one glove can't fit all. So we have to remember how different people are, no matter even if they live with blindness or low vision. So this is why it's so crucial why we don't generalize. And the best thing to do is we have to ask how we could support individuals. Okay, so language matters. So language is very, very powerful. And sometimes we forget how powerful language can be and how even just making a simple statement can really impact that rapport and that relationship that we have with people. So it's so important that we put the person first. So there is times where maybe people do forget say a blind person or a low vision person. It's so key that we put that person first because these individuals have so many different identities, right? And they shouldn't be just known for one identity, especially when we work with them. So we also have to avoid phrases such as the blind or visually impaired unless the person is okay with that terminology. So if that's what they prefer, then we should go with that, right? But for the most part, topics or terms such as visually impaired does take away, and then the blind, it does sound a little bit off-putting for individuals. So, language is not just about words, it's about dignity and respect. It reflects how we see people. So, this is why it's so important as social workers and people who are in the helping field to understand that language can be so powerful and it really pushes that aspect of how a person thrives in society. Okay, accessibility in academic settings. So, as I made mention for me, I've been through the gamut of social work. So, I started off with my social service worker. I started a bachelor's of social work. Ended off with my master's of social work. And I'm not going to sugarcoat. Sorry about that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think I'm just so traumatized from school and a lot of experiences that I can't talk straight. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. With some of my programs, accessibility was something that did need to be addressed. I would say, especially with doing my master's of social work, which was all online, and even with my bachelor's and my social service working, which was in person. So we have to remember that accessibility is not optional, it is essential. So, too often that individuals who are utilizing assistive technology, and I'm going to use screen reader users for example, encounter inaccessible courses, right? Course materials. So, untagged platforms, certain platforms that don't work, when a video is being shown, a lack of descriptive video. So, as we all know, this is a huge barrier to learning. So it's so important when we're in the social work field as professors and faculty members that we have to provide accessible resource materials. We have to understand how assistive technology works and ensure that placements are inclusive and functional for individuals who are blind and low vision. So don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting every professor to fly through screen readers and give assistance to the the students, but then at the same time to have that understanding of when you do have class materials, either if it's a PowerPoint or even if it's a handout, to know that you should provide it in accessible formatting. Because as I made mention, with the whole mantra of us as social workers, us in the helping field, we want to push that people thrive and we want to push for people at their full potential. So at the same time, this is a challenge and this is a barrier that really impedes on individuals learning. So it's so important that we be, instead of being prevention over intervention, or like I said, having prevention over intervention, that we prepare our schools, our faculty, for when we come across a person who's blind or low vision. So instead of someone walking in who's blind or low vision and needing the accommodations, whether it's at placement or whether it is course content, and us figuring out, okay, uh, this is how we're going to figure out, we should at least have a basis of how we can help, right? And as I made mention, we don't want to have that one glove fits all where it's like, okay, we had a student who was blind or low vision, they use this, so you should be using this. We want to have that basis of how we can assist. So it's so important that we at least have basic access when we're accommodating our students who are going through the social work field. Yeah, I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. Perfect. So next up, we're going to look at employment barriers. And as I made mention with the field of social work, and I was actually talking to Rashmi and a bunch of my colleagues before this presentation, I believe that it's an incredible field where it's so many different niches that you could get into. So it's not just a linear type field where you only could do counseling or you only could do research. It's so many different aspects where you can be involved, whether it's working with young people, whether it's working with persons with disabilities, whether it's working with racialized people, individuals who are not from Canada, different aspects, right? And different duties and different skills. So it's so important that we remember that individuals who are blind and low vision do deserve to be working in the workplace without any barriers of accommodation. So, like I said, although social work is rooted in inclusion, we still see structural barriers in our practices. So, blind or low vision social workers often face inaccessible tools and systems, built environments that are not easy to navigate, biased assumptions of what they can and they cannot do. So it's so important that accessibility must be a part of HR and onboarding when individuals are seeking to look for employment. And it should be important that having accessibility within the workplace should be a part of workplace culture. So that will be highlighted upon more with David when we do look at the digital accessibility. But what we have to really remember is our spaces when people are coming to work. And it's so important that the environments are accessible, our policies are accessible, and then attitudes of employees and employers are changed and looking at inclusivity as well. So definitely, it's interesting because sometimes when we look at the field, we just look at academics and we forget that when people are actually in the field, how much it could be a hindrance of getting those accommodations and actually working within the field to help others as well. So just to keep an eye on how we could accommodate and how we could be a little bit more accessible. So definitely David will be highlighting upon that when we look at assistive technology and then digital accessibility. Okay, so a favorite part that I would love to highlight in this presentation, or I really look forward to highlighting in this presentation, is looking at the different theories. So I gotta say, for those who have been through your BSW and your MSW, you're pretty much pelted with a lot of theories, and that's where we find our style of social work. So although theories can be very effective and very helpful to help individuals who are blind or low vision, or just people with disabilities in general, there are still some theories that are very harmful, that we may have to look at and challenge when we are working with someone who's blind or low vision. Okay, so as I made mention, some social work theories do more harm than good, and these are some that we should be rethinking. Okay, so the medical model. So it views disability as a problem and where someone needs to be fixed. It also has the focus on diagnosis and treatment and normalizing individuals so they can fit into societal standards. Also, disability is seen as a medical condition and not a lived experience. So let's look at why it's harmful. So it shifts responsibility away from society and does not look at the barriers throughout the community. And then it looks at the person as a burden and not a system issue. So it reduces people to the diagnosis, ignoring their full identity and autonomy and their potential. So it also encourages paternalism and shows that us as professionals should be making decisions for the clients instead of them making decisions for themselves. It also ignores structural labalism and it does not look at accessibility for our environments. It also looks at discriminative policies or and does not look at cultural stigma. So it reinforces the fact that blindness is deficient and lacks of looking at accessibility. So basically what it is, it takes away from the actual person, or it takes away from how the person functions, and it looks at the way the person functions instead of looking at what society or the changes we should have in society. So a perfect example would be looking at CNIB, we work with APS's, audio pedestrian signals, and looking at the fact that, oh, the person can't cross the street because they're blind or low vision, when we are putting a barrier of not having audible pedestrian signals, where that should be changing within society. Okay, so examples that we could use in practice would be recommending services based solely on the diagnosis without asking individuals. So it's important that we ask the individual and, like I said, empower the individual as well. Okay, so also seen in practice could be believing that someone is blind and they cannot complete a practical job as well. So automatically referring a person to medical rehabilitation without exploring adaptive solutions. So just different aspects that we should keep in consideration when we are uh, kind of going against the medical model. Okay, another one is a charity model. So views people with disabilities as an object of pity. So emphasizes on help, care, and dependency. So assumes a person's passive and needs saving. So it's very important that we do have an eye on what we're doing. We don't want to infantilize individuals who are living with disabilities, blind or low vision. So why it is harmful? It strips away agency and autonomy. It reinforces power imbalances. It focuses on emotion, sympathy instead of equity. So it frames support as generosity and not as a right. So in practice, trying to help without asking what support is needed. So showcasing people with disabilities as inspiration for anything they do. So I know a lot of examples where some of my colleagues, they would go to the grocery store and people would be like, that is so amazing that you're going to the grocery store. That is incredible that you got up today. So just looking at that and ceasing to look at it that way, where it's just a regular day in the life of an individual. Okay. So also, we have the paternalism model. So that assumes that professionals know best, makes decisions for people with disabilities, not with them, frames support as protection and not partnership, and why it is harmful. So it undermines autonomy and self determination, it limits choice and voice, it can lead to controlling practices and services and supports, and it reinforces the idea that blind, low vision people are incapable and unable to make informed decisions. So, in practice, you may see overriding a client's preferences, deciding what tools, services, or supports that a client should be having, speaking about clients instead of speaking to them. Okay, so last one we have the deficit model. So that focus is on what a person can't do, looks at disability as a lack, limitation, or a failure, measures individuals as normal and functioning, and why it's harmful to the blind low vision community because it centers on problems over potential, devalues unique strengths and experiences, leads to low expectations and exclusionary practices. It also reinforces stereotypes of inadequacies and independence. So in practice, you may see assessments that highlight deficiencies over strengths, denying opportunity because it's thought that someone's not ready, ignoring adaptive strategies because they're not typical. And with that said, these are definitely theories that are not empowering to those who live with blind and low vision, and theories that we must really get away from. So, on the other hand, we have theories that are empowering to use in our practices. Okay, so theories and approaches that we should look at, which helps looking at the person instead of, or which helps looking at the system instead of the person, is social model of disability. So a very popular model that we do use here at CNIB, as well as many individuals use when they're practicing with individuals with disabilities. So disabilities are caused by barriers and not impairments. Really focuses on changing society and not the person. So reasons why it is empowering. So it challenges exclusion and not identity, promotes rights, access, and inclusion, supports autonomy and self determination. And in practice, what you're going to see the characteristics while putting the social model or the disability model would be removing barriers, attitudinal or digital type barriers, ask what needs to be changed around this person, design environments that work for everyone, So next up is the strength-based practice, which I know a lot of you folks definitely use in your everyday practice, would be focusing on the capability and assets of the person and not looking at the limitations, seeing individuals as experts in their own lives. So definitely when we're working with blind or low vision people, they know best in how to help themselves, emphasizing growth and potential. And what we are trying to look at is every person has strengths that could support their goals. Disability is not a deficit, it's one part of a rich identity of that person. Supporting empowerment fosters change. Okay, and why it is empowering in social work. So, with our clients, it builds confidence and autonomy, builds collaborative and client practice. So, encouraging seeing clients as whole people and not just one identity. Okay, so when you see people put forth this practice, they ask, what are your strengths? How are we able to find a solution and a resolution? Highlight adaptive skills, creativity, and innovation. Partner with clients to build solutions for them to reach their full potential. So definitely an organization such as CNIB, this is what we really want to push for with that strength based and really finding the strength of a person who lives with low vision or blindness and really finding that technique and strategy on how to get them to fulfill their full potential. Okay, so next up is empowerment theory, similar to the disability model as well as strength based. It's definitely aimed to increase personal political power so people can aim to reach their full potential. So central to anti-oppressive client-central social work, encouraging people to challenge systems and advocate and control of this where control of decisions affecting them. So it's so important that we once again have that empowerment theory, and definitely within my work I find that with parents and young people that we're really working on how to help them get empowered, whether it's in the education system or whether to find awareness within the communities. And I'm going to look in practice while what we should do when we're practicing and positive aspects to empowerment theory would be encouraging decision making and leadership, supporting access to information, and naming and challenging systems of ableism. So, lastly, I'm going to go through anti oppressive practices, case centering equity, justice, and equality, respects lived experiences. So definitely with this said is within our practice, especially at the CNIB, is instead of looking at individuals as just blind low vision, we actually incorporate the different experiences, whether it's racialized, gender, religious, gender identity, and we incorporate that social justice aspect and that disability justice. So definitely, it's mainly about how we could take away that impression that's in communities, along with having individuals who are blind or low vision navigate through the world with both their identities. Okay, so these models recognize that the problem isn't the person, but the system, similar to the different models. Okay, so that was a lot of models, and I feel like we're back in school. And definitely, those are some aspects that we should apply when we're working with persons who are blind or low vision. So, next up, I am going to go into practice tips to when we're serving blind or low vision clients. Okay, so when working directly with clients who are blind or low vision, it's important to ask how they prefer to access information. So some individuals may use Braille, some individuals may use digital platforms or digital documentation. Some individuals may use devices. So it's so important to ask how we could communicate with that individual. So being empathetic, especially when vision loss does represent a loss. So, as I made mention, everybody's different in the journey of sight loss or vision loss or blindness, where some individuals have recently lost vision, right? So, although we do have that mindset of we want to empower, we want equity, we have to understand that because this person just recently may have lost vision, they may take to vision loss a little bit differently compared to someone who was diagnosed vision loss or sight loss or blindness younger. Okay, and on top of that, we also have to find a sweet spot to be empowering, right? Where although they did have their loss, we have to find a way to apply that strength-based practice as well as that empowerment theory. Okay, so as I may mention, offer information in accessible formats. And as I made mention, Dave will go through that a little bit more. So we don't want to also assume incompetence or dependency. And we want to always remember that autonomy and dignity come first when we're working with a person who's blind or low vision. Okay, designing accessible social workspaces. So accessibility isn't just about attitude, it's also about action. So to remember that, yeah, we may say it, but we have to put in that action to do it. So it's so important in your academic or work environment to look at digital accessibility, your websites, your different forms, your different platforms. I know with some platforms that workplaces use or schools use, especially virtual ones, that they may not be accessible for screen readers or magnifiers. So it's so important that we keep in consideration of those different platforms and we work to make them accessible. Also, forms, case noting platforms, they may not be accessible. So just having that keen eye on how do we make this accessible for our colleagues who are blind or low vision. Also, multimedia pictures provided with something called alt text. And that's something where if you're using a screen reader, it describes what the picture is, right? So is our presentations, do they contain these screen readers or not screen readers, the alt text? Do they contain a description? When we are doing presentation, are we being descriptive? Also, when we do have videos, does it have audio description as well? Okay, so also built environment. So although we're looking at policies and we're looking at delivery, we have to look at is our built environments accessible for an individual who lives with blindness, whether they're using a guide dog, whether they're using a cane, and whether they're not using either, are they able to navigate through these spaces? So tactile or high contrasted items. And then last but not least, looking at our workplace policies, do they create barriers? I know, like I said, we're not doing this on purpose. We don't want people to feel excluded. But at the same time, sometimes with our policies and with our structures, that we can create these barriers. So analyzing if the policies do create a barrier for a person. And it's very important to work with that person as well. Okay, so we must examine both our values and our infrastructure and to make sure that individuals who live with low vision or blindness are able to thrive within these spaces. Okay, so last but not least, in social work, we want to promote social justice. So this must include people who live with disabilities, specifically blindness and low vision in this situation. So accessibility, equity, and representation is so key. So by incorporating accessibility, we don't just meet people's needs, we actually assist these individuals to thrive. So it's so important that in our spaces, if we want to help that clientele who lives with low vision or blindness, that we do have people within these spaces to deliver and to learn and to get input from as well. So you will notice that if you're equipped with accessibility, you will be well received by those you work with and those who work with you. Okay, so final reflections, and then I'll pass it on to David. So let's remember representation matters. As I made mention, we want people in our spaces who represent those that we work with. Belonging matters as well. We want to make sure that everybody is included. And accessibility is social justice, right? So that is part of the fight that we all have for equity and inclusion. And together we could create these spaces, workplaces, and schools to include and not exclude individuals who are blind and low vision. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to pass it to my good friend David, and he's going to look at the digital accessibility.
Hey there, thanks so much, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone. And Roshni, thanks for having us, inviting us. We appreciate it. So just like Ben mentioned, I'll be taking you through quickly about digital accessibility. So Ben did refer to it a few times. So just to kind of give you a real, an idea of what digital accessibility is, it's essentially the practice of creating or designing anything digital. So digital media such as websites on your computer or your phone, apps you may use. Ben had mentioned video being accessible, social media even being accessible. We're talking, your Twitter or X, your Instagram, things like that being accessible, and to be able to be used by as wide an audience as possible. So what I like to do is to try and give you an example for those of you who are fully sighted, what an accessible document would be like to a sighted person and how it translates to someone who is blind or low vision or has low vision. So I know I'm dating myself a bit. Not everyone reads newspapers anymore, but imagine you picked up a newspaper and you were trying to find whatever part of that newspaper you're looking for. Let's say the world news or the weather section. The first thing typically you would do is you would scan the headlines, you'd see what story interested you, and then begin to read that story. Or you would go to a section, for example, that showed you where the sections were, weather, sports, world news, what have you, and you would then flip to that page. Now, if your document or your website, what have you, here we're talking about documents, but websites, everything else works very similar. It would be like looking at a newspaper that had no text. Essentially, what a screen reader does is it looks for these headings, these to read, to figure out what it's looking at to read. So, for example, if there are no headers on the paper, another example could be, it would be like a newspaper with no headings, and all it would have is text at the same font. So technically, you could still read that newspaper, but it would take you forever to find a specific section. You'd have to consume all that information until you reach the section that you wanted. So just to kind of give you an idea, if you're fully sighted, what it's like when you're using a screen reader to read a document that's not accessible. So to take you back a little bit here, 15 years ago, when I started working in accessibility, and I would create a Word document. Many of you may do the same. So if you're creating a Word document, I would create a Word document. I might make my title of the document say font size 18. I would make my first heading, subheading say font size 16. I'd make my paragraph maybe font size 14. And away I go to create my document, my project, my report, statement of work, what have you. However, so if you're fully cited, you can absolutely consume that information. You know what the title is, you know what the paragraphs are, whatnot. But what you need to do if you're looking at someone using a screen reader or some type of low vision software, and they're using the voice part of it, to actually listen to the screen reader part of it, you need to make sure that your headings are marked as headings. So if you're using Word or a document like that, a quick way of doing that is actually to go into styles on your Word document, and you actually have to mark your heading as heading 1. Your subheadings is headings 2. Your subheading 2. Your level 3 headings is level 3 headings. I've got a little slide here on headings specifically, but it applies to all data really. So if you have a numbered list, a bulleted list, a table of contents, you can actually in Word mark all of these in Word as what they are. A link, a hyperlink to a website, for example. So a screen reader user would then be able to access all that information properly on using their screen reader. It just kind of gives you an idea how you can make a document accessible with your if you're creating documents on your own, for example, and how a screen reader actually consumes that information. So the importance of digital accessibility, why it's accessible or why it's important. So one, of course, is business benefits. So it can have a tangible difference on an organization. Secondly, the law. There are legal considerations. So here in Canada, there are specific laws that actually require businesses to make anything digital accessible to people with a print disability or a visual disability, what have you. So they can produce things in audio, accessible PDFs, sometimes just a flat text file. But there are different ways, for example, that you can produce accessible content. There's also social responsibility. Essentially, it's the right thing to do. Again, that someone who, regardless of their ability, they have equal access to this information and they have equal access to these opportunities. And lastly, of course, we have user experience. Accessibility ensures that everyone has the same or they can access this information. Sometimes it can just be age related. Maybe you have, you've seen websites, for example, that allow someone, a user who, as they get older, all of us, our vision does change. Most of us, our vision changes. So even if you're not considered low vision, your vision may change and you may require extra brightness or a font size change. So things like that can be helpful for folks with any type of vision condition. And that again falls under digital accessibility. So now let me give you a real world example of what it might be like for someone who has an issue with digital accessibility. So let's imagine this actually happened to me recently, which is why I'm thinking about it. I recently got a new credit card. And if you notice nowadays, the new credit cards they're flat. If you've gotten a new credit card of any kind, they're coming out as being flat and they no longer have the raised print on them anymore. So the thing is with that raised print, people could in the past be able to kind of discern what the numbers were sometimes. But imagine if that's no longer the case. It's just a flat card. They get that new card and they need to activate it now. How would this affect someone who is blind or low vision? Well, the answer is really simple. Essentially, that means that they would need to ask somebody else, for example, and trust that friend, that family member, a neighbor, sometimes even perhaps a complete stranger, to read that card information for them so that they can call or activate their credit card through that portal. So again, if you can't see that credit card number and you have no idea what it is, you have no way to discern, there's no braille, there's no raised print, it's just flat. There's no technology at your disposal. You'd have to trust someone in order to let you know what that card number is. Or even if you flip it back over, that 3-digit or 4-digit number, the CVV, you need to, again, trust someone to help you with that information. In the future, what some folks do, even today in our community, is they will put something on that credit card to know a difference between a bank card. If you're like me, I bank with CIBC, for example. And at CIBC, the card numbers look all the same. The cards look very similar. So my bank card and my credit card look identical. So what people do is they'll put like a bit of a tactile indicator on it so that they'll know, hey, this is my bank card. This is my credit card, or this is an RBC card versus a Scotiabank card. So you'll have an idea, for example, of what card is which. They'll put a little tactile indicator. I mentioned before having a stranger, help you find a particular card. Kind of a last resort, but again, that does happen. Where if you need some help, sometimes that is the only option that you have. A lot of folks will even commit all their card numbers to memory. So you can imagine a 16-digit credit card number with the CVV. A lot of you can do it, don't get me wrong, but you can imagine having to commit that to memory. So there are ways that accessibility, this is just one particular instance where thinking about how to provide that credit card information in a different way could be helpful to someone from our community, and where digital accessibility and accessibility in general kind of comes all together in just one quick story. So there's different types of accessibility technology that folks use in our community. They can be Braille devices. So we've all seen Braille at like a business or a hotel or whatnot. There's still a lot of Braille users. Braille is a foundation, when it comes to our community and be able to consume and read data. You can have Braille embossers, which is really like a Braille printer. So it'll print Braille for people to read. There are current devices which are called refreshable Braille displays. So essentially, it's whatever you would see on a screen of your laptop or whatnot would actually come up as Braille on like a Braille keyboard. Screen readers, you've heard a lot about. Essentially, a screen reader will take the information on the screen and it will communicate it to the user in audio. So they can navigate using their keyboard, be it a Braille keyboard or just a regular QWERTY style keyboard, and they can actually be able to navigate that screen without actually seeing the information on the screen. They actually can use that screen reader to run through it. There are also different text-to-speech solutions. Some are wearable, some are software, some are just standalone units. A Daisy book reader, it's just a bit of a different format that folks use to have information read to them. Magnification software. So if you are low vision or have any type of eye condition that may require magnification or a change in contrast, there's magnification software available. Some of it's free within your, you can sometimes just zoom and pinch on, say, a cell phone. But some of them, you'll need a software. For example, it could be built into a Windows or an Apple a laptop, or you can actually purchase different software. A popular one's called a Zoom Text, if you've heard of that, which allows you to make kind of changes to your desktop, your size of your mouse, your pointer, things like that. There are video magnifiers, which allow someone to, you may have seen in the past, folks using a glass handheld magnifier. Well, there's now video magnifiers that are like almost like your cell phone, except they work a little better because they focus quicker, but you can zoom and read print. So if you have low vision, you're able to use devices like that. There are enhanced keyboards that have different keystrokes built in. A lot of folks in our community rely on keystrokes because Keystrokes allow you to do things quicker in some cases. So keystrokes are important, and these enhanced keyboards allow you to do that. And then there's what I call the other category. And some of these can even be devices that are not specifically designed for our community, but can be used by the community. Like a lot of folks in our community now are using I think they're called the meta glasses, that has a bit of a camera and it can read to you and pass information. Those are great because you can point to like a menu at a Tim Hortons, for example, and have that information communicated to you. So there are different devices that folks in the community are able to use for, accessible technology. I won't spend too much on this, but there are guidelines. So there's a community called we call it WCAG for short, WCAG, which stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So there are actually guidelines that web developers, app developers can use in order to ensure that their app or a website is accessible. So just to run through it really quickly for you, the first one's perceivable, meaning that whoever's using it must be able to perceive all the information presented. So there's nothing that would be invisible to that user. Operable. If there is anything that they need to operate, for example, say fill out a form on a website, Ben had mentioned earlier, a user interface, it needs to be operable for all users. Understandable, just that. A user must be able to understand the information that's being presented to them, as well as any user interface. And the last one is robust, is that it must be able to work or be interpreted by a wide variety of assistive technology, which I just kind of showed you in that last slide, the different assistive technology that folks use. There's also guidelines for PDFs. So it's called something called PDF UA. UA stands for Universal Accessibility. And essentially, PDFs could be a bit of a nightmare for folks who are blind or low vision. And the reason is because they're not always designed to be accessible. And a PDF, if it's not accessible when you're using assistive technology, is essentially a blank document to a user. So if it's not formatted properly in the same way that I was explaining before with tagging what a header is, a hyperlink, a bulleted list, a numbered list, from a assistive technology standpoint, a screen reader especially, it can be a blank document where the screen reader cannot pick up any information from it. Many times it might be able to read the text and just the text in order. Like if you remember when I showed you the newspaper, and you imagine the newspaper all has one font throughout it, and there's no breaks, it's just one big paragraph. Some of the screen readers can do that with some PDFs if they're not accessible. But if a PDF is accessible and it's got that context structure perfectly tagged and whatnot, they're great for people in our community. So there's many different ways you can test to see that your document is accessible. You can, if you look at Word, you may have seen it yourselves. There's actually an accessibility check. It's not the greatest. It's not the most intuitive. It checks for the most basic of issues, but it's something. So at the very least, if you're looking at doing something, you can use that accessibility check in Word. If you're doing anything through Adobe, it has something called the Adobe Accessibility Check. This is a bit better than the one in Word, and it loosely checks based on that WCAG standards I showed you before. So it's a little more stringent in that case. There is a tool that you can actually download. It's completely free. It's produced by those folks at WCAG, and it's called we call it a pack checker, but it's a PDF accessibility checker. I think there's a new version. The version I still use is from 2021. But what it does is it will actually check your PDF. You drag and drop it into the tool, and it will check to see what is not tagged properly on your document, allowing you time to change it to make it accessible. However, the best way, still, believe it or not, is human intervention, where you actually run through that Word document and you make sure all your headers, everything I mentioned before, is all tagged properly. And then you can ensure that you have an accessible document, run it through one of those checks to make sure, but that's usually the best way that you can go through to make sure that your document's accessible. There's a bunch of different resources online to teach you how to do that if you don't know how. So accessibility remediation. You can also, these are some of the tools that folks use, and how if you're really putting the effort into making sure documents are accessible. JAWS and Fusion and NVDA are screen readers, and Supernova as well. Those are screen readers where it'll read the content on a screen. Zoom text, magnifier, those are screen magnification tools. Narrator on Windows is actually a screen reader tool that's built into Windows. And VoiceOver and TalkBack, those are tools that actually are either on your Android phone or VoiceOver, your Apple phone, that allow, again, folks to navigate using their cell phones using a screen reader, a built-in screen reader. So I mentioned to you before about the law. So just to dive into this real quickly for based on your profession, there is a law. It's called the ACA, or the Accessible Canada Act. It was passed in 2019. And the goal of the ACA is to have a barrier-free Canada by 2040. So one of the stats that has always kind of stood out to me, since I've been in the accessibility industry, is that less than 60% of those with a disability aged 25 to 64 have jobs. So it's not to say that they're not capable of working, but the unemployment rate is so high in our community. Especially, this translates again to our blind and low vision community. And again, when it comes down to it as well, Canadians with disability, if it's considered quote unquote milder, they earn about 12% less. And those with more severe disabilities earn more than half as much, as a fully abled Canadian. So these are things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to, looking out for folks. And they're fully capable of working. They want to work. And part of the next thing I'll show you too is what we call something that we handle as well at CNIB, but there's workplace accommodations. So essentially, the Supreme Court in Canada has ruled that an employee who is able to work can do so, and the employer must accommodate that employee as long as it's not causing the employer undue hardship. So, for example, if it involves getting some of this software that I told you about earlier, that's something that can be done to help an employee to continue working. And we do these employee accommodations all the time, where some of our experts will go out, and I'll give you an example in a second of what those are. But we'll do assessments for employees, and it helps them to continue working, even as they're going through vision loss. They're able to continue working, just like differently than they did before, but they're still able to continue working. So there's about 4 different tests that we could possibly do. One is called an assistive technology assessment. So that basically sits them down and finds out what their tasks are for their position, and sees what type of assistive tech, be it a screen reader, video magnifier, different lighting, what it could be that could help them to continue performing their tasks. A functional vision assessment essentially teaches them how to maximize any remaining vision. So if they still have vision, they're looking at continuing to use it. A functional vision test will give them tips and tricks. Again, lighting is a big thing. When it comes to, or using contrast on on a computer, on a screen. Perhaps it might be a larger monitor, things like that that can help them to maximize their remaining vision. The other two that are fairly popular are what we call an O&M assessment, or orientation mobility. So that kind of teaches someone to travel independently, both indoors and outdoors. So it could be within the office, could be the route from their office to home, home to office, with or without assistance. It could be with their guide dog, could be with their cane, seeing, for example, where there are any potential dangers or tripping hazards, things like that. Independent living skills, that's more in the home than anything else, but it helps with time management, dressing, personal care, cooking, things like that. But that's another assessment that the CNIB offers as well. Finally, for businesses, what we also do is and Ben kind of hinted at this earlier, is we do a built environment assessment. So that's going into a business, a store, government office, what have you. And essentially, it's an assessment where our experts will look at signage, lighting, surface finishes, see, for example, if there's anything. A big one might be, if you go into offices a lot today, for example, that it's very pretty. Again, if you're fully sighted, where it has like floor to ceiling glass, for example. But sometimes it may be hard to know where the entrance is, where the glass wall is, things like that. So an obstacle and hazards, how to find emergency exits or emergency equipment like fire extinguishers, things like that. Also goes on, elevators is a big thing. How to navigate using that elevator. Does it have tactile, something tactile so you can find out where the floors are? Or is it auditory? Does it mention the floors as you're passing them? Or when you press the button, does it tell you the floor selected? Steps and ramps, safety zones, circulation. This was a big thing through COVID. If you remember how you could only in some stores, go down one aisle and up another, things like that. So this is what's all involved in a built environment assessment. And when it comes to workplace accommodations as well, there are some keys here. Again, listening, involve the actual the person, the client, and promoting any inclusivity and that's possible to, again, make sure that they can still continue in their position when it comes to working. So again, workplace, remember to value the individual, remember to value their privacy, their confidentiality, and like Ben mentioned, make sure you include them in their decisions. No two people are the same. So make sure that you get their feedback and include them in any of the decisions that are being made. And keep in mind that accommodation that can work for one person does not necessarily mean it'll work for the next. One quick example I'll give you is that you might have two people with the same eye condition. One prefers to use any remaining vision they have. One person may prefer to use a screen reader. One may decide to use a magnification, yet they both have the same on paper visual acuity. Everyone's different, just depends on what they're more comfortable with. So for my last slide here, before I throw it over to Andrew, again, you can talk more about disability in the workplace to normalize it. And again, make sure you use inclusive language. We use first language at CNIB. Review any policies that assess any potential barriers. Again, using languages that focus on people. We mention that a lot, again, at CNIB. Ensure that events, holiday parties, things like that are accessible to people. So, when you're getting together with other staff members, make sure that, everyone's able to participate. Don't have it in a restaurant that has no accessibility, for example, that they they get all dressed up, they go down, and they can't actually get into the venue. Things like that have happened. Make sure things are open and comfortable for the employee to discuss any issues. And again, take a look at the environment. That's that built environment assessment to see if there's any type of barriers that they might face. And then lastly, diversity education, accessibility awareness. So it's something that we provide at the CNIB, but that accessibility awareness to get them an idea of what this person may need in terms of digital accessibility or accessibility period. And that way folks will know, if you're passing a memo to someone or an email or whatnot, that it's in a format that's being able to consume if they're using especially assistive technology. So thanks so much, and I'll throw things over to close to Andrew.
Thanks, David. And thank you, Ben, as well. That was an excellent presentation. I know I learned a lot, and there's a lot of value in what we delivered today. A lot of what I'm going to chat on is in terms of partnerships, and I'll sort of introduce myself and my level of vision as well. I think it's important, but I wanted to keep it short for us today in terms of chat about partnership and involvement, just to not take away from the whole social work aspect of what's already been said. So I want to thank the CASW members as well as Roshni for organizing this event. This is amazing. And yeah, so I'm going to touch a little bit more on my role here at CNIB and sort of how I engage with organizations across Canada from coast to coast, both, whether it's French organizations or English. I work with these national partners to help develop and move forward in our strategic plan. So, we want to ensure that we're touching on safe and accessible journeys. Our kids will thrive, and attitude is everything. So what we're touching on today is very much in terms of attitude is everything. We are trying to change what it means to be blind or have sight loss. I myself have the same condition as Ben, so retinitis pigmentosa, and I am affected in terms of having night blindness. I have depth perception issues, peripheral vision, blind spots. Some of the tools that I use for my level of vision, I have a white cane as well for low light settings, and having night blindness as well. I require a white cane to navigate in certain situations. I have a giant monitor in front of me. It's sort of like a spaceship here at my desk with large text, dark background, high contrast, you name it, and some zoom functions. And the reason why I like to sort of start with my level of vision is just to sort of emphasize that I am proud of sight loss and the tools that I use, and I find there's more skills that I've gained out of it than sort of any negative aspects of sight loss, and that there's such a broad range of sight loss as mentioned from my colleagues. And although Ben and I may have the same eye condition, it's affects us very differently. And I'm more of a werewolf where you wouldn't be able to tell I have sight loss during the day and in normal lit settings, but come nighttime I'm fully blind. So there's just so many different ranges of sight loss, and that's a big part of what I do with CNIB and partnerships is I try to change what it means to be blind and change the mindsets of the staff members within organizations. So sort of that attitude is everything piece. So today I put together sort of just a very broad overview of how you can get involved. So there's the three main areas of involvement. We have our program funding. We are a nonprofit organization who does rely on our partners and community members to help fund programming from big and small. So I highly encourage folks to check out our website and how you can get involved in funding. We do have specific funding opportunities with partners on specific initiatives. I'm not going to go too much into details because this is going to touch a wide range of folks, just sort of throwing it out there. We do have our sponsorship opportunities for events, and some of the events that I have listed here to my right. I have the Connecting the Dots event, which is sort of Canada's largest accessibility, education and technology and employment conference for the sight loss and blind community. So that generally happens 3 times a year, and there is ways for organizations and individuals to get involved, whether from a employment standpoint or a volunteering standpoint. If you wanted to showcase new technologies in relation to our community from your organization, we do have opportunities to be guest speakers for the event. We do have our Lake Joe wish list for kids who are wanting to attend summer camp. So this is a Lake Joe in Muskoka, Ontario, that offers a very accessible and amazing environment for the children in the sight loss or blind community. I personally can say I've been on a work event at Lake Joe, and it's something that I hold really closely to my heart in terms of what the staffing there does for the community. It's quite amazing. It's a great opportunity for kids to feel like they have the opportunity to do activities that they normally would sort of be steered out of in day-to-day life, if you will. So there are the activities such as the tubing and boating. There's blind ball hockey, blind basketball, goal ball, archery, rock climbing. Of course, I'm just going to name the sports because I'm obsessed with sports, but there's other sort of craft activities and sort of initiatives and ways that our kids are being engaged with each other, and it's quite amazing. We have the mobile hub, and again, these are not all the events, but ones that I want to highlight because they're really relevant to this year and in the next few years. So I just want to sort of throw them out there. We have our mobile hub, which is currently happening from coast to coast this year, allowing the CNIB Foundation and its programs to sort of go to locations that don't necessarily have CNIB offices nearby. So we're bringing the services and the programs to our community members in remote areas. I have had the chance to participate in the mobile hub here on the West Coast, and it was amazing. Quite an opportunity, and it touched a lot of people's lives and sort of allowed them to understand a bit more about our programs and services and how we help the community. How we help the community. And then lastly, the one I wanted to really emphasize on is for sponsorships, especially. We do have a large movement towards our Canadian Blind Hockey League. So this has been running for quite some time, but has grown quite a bit in the last few years. So I did attend this year's event in Toronto, and it was a 3-day long event with over 25 different games, ranging from 200 different individuals with sight loss or blindness, and half of those were actually kids, which is amazing. So there were over 100 athletes who were youth participating in blind hockey, and it was amazing. We had a blast, and I know the partners who sponsored and helped with funding also had a blast, and it was equally beneficial to have them engaged. And There was also the opportunity to get involved in the international side of blind hockey, where Canada face off the US. We are undefeated. Just a big shout out to Canada and blind hockey. But there's a lot of opportunity for folks to get involved, again, from a volunteering standpoint and from a funding standpoint. So I'll make sure that everyone has in attendance today the resources and links to be involved in these events or programs that I mentioned. And for folks who are listening, either in the future within the platform or on YouTube, then we will ensure that we have just a plug-in at the end here. But by all means, I recommend everyone to reach out to the CNIB to sort of connect with the right person who can sort of have you engaged. So, and then the other sort of point of involvement that I wanted to mention was the collaborative side. So I'm gonna chat about volunteering a lot here because CNIB couldn't run without our volunteers. We just had our National Volunteer Appreciation Week 2 weeks ago, and there's a big thank you and emphasis to our volunteers that without them, there's a lot of our programs that would not be able to operate just based on us being a nonprofit and really requiring support from community in so many different programs. We have vision mates that are dedicated to working with the sight loss community and day-to-day activities and really making a difference in the lives of our community members. So huge shout out to the volunteers from CNIB standpoint, and really encourage you folks to get involved as a volunteer in any capacity. So outside of that, we do offer mentorship, or we do have a mentorship side of our programming that we do encourage folks who want to become mentors and sort of have that experience in their career. We do tailor our mentorship programs with members who are sort of seeking to be in the same industry as yourself. So it's a one-on-one sort of mentorship opportunity that is more tailored towards you and the mentee. And then we also have the collaborative side with the Come to Work program. So I stem from this program, so I could go on for hours about how great the program and what the details are, but I won't. I'll just throw in there that our flagship Come to Work program is just an amazing program that allows our members from the sight loss community who are seeking employment from any level to sort of gain the confidence, the skills, and the tools necessary to thrive in workplace, all the way from new and adjusting to sight loss, all the way to currently employed and needing resources or support from outreach staff. So we do collaborate with organizations, and that's part of my role is having those partners involved and working with Come to Work talent pool members as sort of a talent pool, we call them, to employment, and we provide networking opportunities for both talent pool and organizations. We include, information sessions such as something like this, and we encourage more inclusive hiring from our partners. So I'll leave it at that, but the Come to Work program, highly recommend checking out the links that will be sent to you in the resource here today. And then so those are the three sort of ways to get involved. The other sort of programs, all our programs at CNIB are in the threshold of live, tech, and play. So we have our guide dog program, we have our Smart Life program, which is assisted technology devices that are marketed through the CNIB Smart Life platform. And then, as mentioned, the Lake Joe, and then the Phone It Forward program is another way to get involved for folks who have older or working iPhones that are no longer in use that you can donate to CNIB, and obviously it gets wiped clean of all data and is then transformed into an accessible friendly iPhone that we then provide training to sight loss or blind members in the CNIB community. So yeah, that is the ways to get involved. And again, I'm just going to switch slide here. You know, the last sort of plug-in here will be volunteering. Like I said, we want to thank our volunteers for participating. We will never turn away more volunteers as needed. I think within the social work industry, there's a lot of need as we sort of try to build our strategic plans surrounding well-being. So that's something to keep in mind, that there's a lot of upcoming movement for well-being and mental health, and that's a way for you folks today to get involved. So thank you. I'm going to now pass it over to Roshni, and I will take a look at the Q&As and make sure to answer those as well. Roshni, I think you're muted. Oh, I don't hear you. One sec, let me just make sure. Shows you're not muted, but I cannot hear you. Oh, I hear clicking.
Yeah, I'm just jumping in to say I can't hear her either.
Technology. Roshni, I think we can hear you now. Maybe try.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
There we go.
Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, as we're talking about technology and accessible technology, here we are experiencing some tech issues. But I just want to give a huge thank you to the CNIB team, to Ben, Andrew, and David. Really appreciate you coming out and sharing all your knowledge and your wisdom with us. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we're not going to be able to address some of the questions in the chat, but we will be in touch via email, a follow-up email, so that you can get in touch with our presenters directly if you do have any follow-up questions from this webinar. Again, a huge thank you to Ben, Andrew, and David. And we really appreciate all of our CSW members for taking the time to join us here today. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day, everyone.